Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to episode 12 of Unfair and Unbalanced, a podcast with Roy Snell and Tom Fox. This is part 2 of our episode we recorded live in front of a studio audience at the SCCE 15th Annual Compliance and Ethics Institute, which concluded in September. In this podcast, we are able to interact with a live audience and bounce from topic to topic. The topics on this episode include: we take a hard look at whether compliance officers should be involved in the setting of the salary of CEOs. We take a look at Arnold Palmer and the culture of ethics. We ask, how can we continue to encourage and celebrate ethical individuals? We discuss whistleblowers and the first-time front pay award by the Securities and Exchange Commission, asking how much pain do companies have to feel to stop encouraging unethical behavior. We conclude by taking a look at the very interesting question of should compliance officers sit on the nomination committee and help choose those who are elevated to the C-suite and a board of directors. The episode comes in at just under 30 minutes. I hope you enjoy it. This is Tom Fox. I'd like to thank you very much for listening to this episode of Unfair and Unbalanced.
Tom, should compliance officers get involved in setting the salary of the CEO?
So there's been a lot of negative publicity about salaries of CEOs, how much they've grown. I don't think chief compliance officers should be involved in setting of the base salary. I do have different views on compensation structure, because that's where, specifically with Mylan and the EpiPen matter, I think the comp beyond base salary got the company into trouble, because I think the CEO was incentivized to hit certain numbers of stock price, and you can only do that by jacking up the price of previously existing products that were relatively low. And so I think when it comes to compensation other than base salary, I think compliance needs to have at least visibility into that, and companies need to understand that if it all goes down the tubes, this is going to be a huge reputational hickey that you're going to get.
So what I hear you saying is no to base, yes to incentives.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. I agree completely. There are folks in our profession who believe that we ought to get involved in CEO salary setting, and that is a social issue, and it is absolutely beyond the scope of the compliance officer. If you start trying to get involved as a compliance officer in the CEO salary and pricing, here's another way to describe it. Where the heck does it stop? We should be running the company. If you agree with
Did you hear me last night? We are running the company.
Yeah. You were pretty passionate last night. By the way, we like to jump around a lot. It's one of the beautiful things of these podcasts. We just left turn so great we should be wearing neck braces. Tom last night we give awards away 4 or 5 a year for the last 10 years or so. And Tom got an award last night specifically for his contributions to the rest of the world. He just gives. He writes and blogs and teaches and gives greatly. I hope we give back enough to at least be fair about this. We'll never give you back as much as you've given us. And as a result, we gave him an award. And for those who are watching, it is a beautiful thing, an Oscar. As a matter of fact, this is kind of a funny ethical issue. These people make this award, and it looks just like an Oscar. And apparently they got sued. And on here somewhere, maybe on the base, maybe it's not there now, but they had to write, or maybe it's in the marketing materials, this is not an Oscar. It was the settlement they had. We're giving away a little unethical thing here, but Tom here's the point I want to make. When we first did this award thing, we didn't see something coming. The people who got the award got up, and the vast majority of them said things about this profession and the people in the audience about how great the profession is and how great things are, and we're empathetic to the profession and complimentary of the profession as you were last night. And of all the people who accepted, they were all wonderful, but yours really followed the spirit of something that has happened organically. And I want to thank you for, instead of getting up there and say, you know, you're right, I'm wonderful. You got up and said, you know, I want to take this moment to say how wonderful the profession is. So well done.
Thank you.
I'm going to,
Your turn.
can I do another
Sure.
big left turn? Arnold Palmer passed away a couple days ago.
He did.
And I just wrote an article once, and I happen to believe that the ethical culture of the golfing community, professional golfing particularly, is just stunning. And how it got started, how it happened. I think we talked about this once. And Arnold Palmer was just the epitome of the kind of human being that we should all seek to be. His integrity and empathy for others and humbleness was just phenomenal. And, you know, he trended on Twitter for a couple of days or whatever, but, you know.
You're really into the social media thing, man.
I know.
Really.
Well, since we trended, have we talked about this yet on the
Yeah.
podcast?
See, that really does go on.
For those of you listening, we trended on Twitter this week. This compliance community, in my opinion, SCCE, CEI hashtag for this conference was actually trending. And I think I did again today, 2 days. Yeah, pretty cool. Here's my point.
He always gets around it.
I have a point.
He does.
Is that we'll talk about Lochte for 2 weeks. We'll talk about Arnold Palmer for 2 days. I tweeted this out the other day, there it is again. We celebrate people who had a moment of no integrity, or I don't know Lochte well enough to say he doesn't have integrity. I just know he had a moment, but you lost it if you had it. We'll talk about him for a week. That was like a one mistake at night, and it's stupid and it's wrong and it's up. But 2 weeks, everybody all day talking about him. Arnold Palmer, one of the highest integrity people that we see in the public, and it's like nothing. It's just infuriating. I wish there was a way we could fix that. How do we fix that?
Well, we celebrate those people and we talk about those people. And we try to hold those people up as teaching tools, teaching moments, people that we can aspire to be. And I guess that means I need to blog about Arnold Palmer.
I would like to see you do that, and as the fact that I haven't decided to do that until just now is a good thing. Did you have something you just were going to say?
No, it's your turn to ask questions.
Okay. How about, does anybody have a topic, just a topic that...
Leona, did you have a question?
I guess my comment is more along the lines of analogy. When we're talking about risk versus, corporate social responsibility, the responsibility of the individual and the responsibility of leadership, in the Wells Fargo case, unfortunately I'm going back to that, definitely people should be held responsible for their bad behavior. And I can't say that I have a lot of sympathy for that situation. However, there's a certain number of times, it's like when you design a product to do something, and over again you get reports of people using it wrong and hurting themselves. You can always explain away, well, they're using it wrong. There is a point where you have to admit there's bad design. And this is a situation where there was bad design that could encourage this behavior. And actually, just knowing how much information flows through some of these companies, it's actually very easy to overlook the cumulative effect of that behavior that you don't see. Because it's not
like a virus or a fungus, and it just grows and grows.
Right.
Or conversely, like in the case of the golfing community, it is a virus in the other direction. Good behavior, proper behavior, honesty, integrity grows like a weed. That's an interesting point. That there's it's like a teeter-totter. If you can get the momentum headed in the right direction and keep pushing, you can go to good places. Or if you don't focus on it, and let bad behavior go on, and somebody in another department will say, well, they're doing that over there, I guess I'm gonna do it, so it's a good point.
And also, but that doesn't excuse not trying to find out.
We've got a patient person in the back.
Oh, yeah.
She has the best comment of all so far, I'm pretty sure.
No pressure.
I'm sure I have the best comment, because I'm Roy's favorite, remember?
That's a fact. She's got the tape to prove it.
I was thinking when we were talking about Wells Fargo and Yahoo, and I hate to keep talking about that, but it made me think about something when we were talking about, well, this is what happens overseas. Well, let's stay right here in the U.S. And so we talked about, well, we need to celebrate when people make good decisions, right? And so when you have a C-level or executive person at a company who does decide to stand up for what's right, not engage in illegal or unethical behavior, whether they are a compliance officer or someone else, perhaps they become a whistleblower, and then the worst thing for them does happen. They do get terminated, right? So if we celebrate them, what does that mean? Because now they have lost their ability to provide for their family. They have to hire an attorney. They have to file a lawsuit for wrongful termination. They have to go through a trial court, which will have continuance. And then when there's a decision there, if the company that they whistleblowed on is unhappy with the decision, now they have to go through appeals court and perhaps Supreme Court. So 4 or 5 years after they've done the right thing, and all of us have forgotten about what they did, now they get some sort of justice. But in the meantime, they haven't just lost that executive role. And if we're talking about someone at a large company, that they do have a duty to all of us to do the right thing, they've lost several hundreds of thousands of dollars a year income and a reputation, right? Someone might say, oh, they did the right thing. But if they're terminated and they go and apply for another job, that's on their record now. So they're thinking about that as well. And how do they explain that, right? They could go in there and say, but I did the right thing. Yes, I was terminated, but I did the right thing. And the other person on the other side of the table is like, yeah, you're a great person. I'm glad you did the right thing, but I don't know if I want you to come work here because maybe you're actually a troublemaker. I don't know. You were the president of that company or the vice president of that company. I don't know you personally. I don't know that you don't have some other alternative. And I bring that up because that's very much a scenario that's going on right now. And so celebrating them means what? How do we bring this to be something? Because what could happen is reverse psychology in the other departments. They see a president or vice president, right thing, terminated, doesn't get satisfaction for 5 years, loses their home or whatever. And so the other department C-suite persons are doing what? I'm not going to stand up. I should, but look at what happened to Joey, or look at what happened to Susan. And so it's not just about that one person doing the one right thing and celebrating that one right person, but then how do we, if something negative happens because they did the right thing, how do we continue to encourage the other persons left still at that company or at other companies to continue to do the right thing?
I'm gonna give this one to Tom.
I know that's long, sorry.
So as everyone knows, I'm a recovering lawyer, but the answer here is, I think the legal response will drive the cultural response. And the legal response is that now, for the first time, we had a whistleblower case where front pay was awarded. Front pay means the money you would have earned had you not been terminated, not what you lost because you were terminated. So it can be a huge number because it's multiplied out with compounded or single interest, so that it can really increase the size of the reward. And if you make it so financially painful for a company, that will start the change, the driving culture. So hopefully by courts accepting front pay for whistleblowers, that will start to drive a conversation in companies because they will say, it's too expensive for us to engage in this kind of behavior. We're not going to engage in this kind of behavior. So I think the legal response will hopefully drive the cultural response, but you're absolutely right. It's a huge problem, and we're just going to have to change it through communication and legal response and
and trying to talk about it.
I'm gonna ask Tom another question here, and if somebody else has a topic or a question, topics or questions, it'd be great. SAI Global,
Yes,
this got sold for how much?
$1 billion.
What do you think of this?
So we, the people in this room, know SAI Global as part of the compliance community, a service provider and a product provider in the compliance community. They are, as I understand, one of 17 either subsidiaries or companies within a greater SAI Global.
Yeah.
So what I don't know is how much of the compliance work is the entire company, but the entire company was sold for $1 billion. So I at this point, I can't evaluate
Yeah.
whether that's a new harbinger of greatness for compliance providers.
They happen to have a booth here. I happened to talk to one of the guys in the booth, and I said, I just don't understand $1 billion for a compliance company, and we had talked earlier yesterday, and I said, there must be something else I'm missing here. And he says, yeah, and he rattled off some other things that they're doing that are just gigantically bigger and different and non-compliant. So my first reaction was, holy cow, a compliance company got sold for $1 billion. And pretty quickly we all realized there must be something else there.
Well, and the other thing is I read some articles anticipating you would harangue me with this question. I read some articles in the Australian press. It's an Australian company. It was actually viewed in Australia as a distressed company that was bought at a very low price. So the $1 billion was viewed as a very good deal.
A good deal. And I think that there's some indication that there might be some other things
Yes.
going on that maybe are not as publicly available right now that adds value to the organization. Do we have any other topics or questions?
Louis?
An undercurrent that I think we're starting to hear more and more at this conference is really just the word culture. It gets thrown in constantly into almost every discussion in compliance nowadays. And I think that even harkening back to your discussion about risk and really looking at all of the risks of an organization, you don't get to do that unless you actually have a culture that's willing to bubble those up,
Right.
And you're able to find them. So the concept of compliance officer as culture driver, I would say that most organizations would, in the first, shudder at that a little bit because culture has always been the purview of HR and others. And yet, I think that the concept of compliance culture and the concept of doing the right thing is actually probably the highest calling of the compliance officer. And how do we really make that shift as a profession, and as we become more of a profession, to really always having that focus that we're driving more than just compliance with a given regulation or law, but we are in fact creating a culture where people care deeply about getting things right.
I was just talking to Ryan Mead this morning, who has put together one of the best compliance degrees in the country at Loyola, and he said something I never heard and never thought about it, and he was just profoundly correct, that he thinks that there are, let me put it this way, I've always been concerned that there's some people who have the title compliance and ethics officer, and all they do is run around all day saying, let's do the right thing. They don't want to audit, they don't want to monitor, they don't want to investigate, they don't like the stick, they want the carrot. If we just tell everybody to do the right thing, we're all going to be magically okay. Go beyond compliance to ethics. If you ever want to see my head explode, give me a Red Bull or say go beyond compliance
You really do. It's a
to
lot of
ethics.
fun.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. He loves doing this. So Ryan Mead says to me, kind of what you're saying in a different way, just the opposite. I think some people have slapped the word ethics on their compliance title, and they're really not all in. And Ryan and I actually kicked around some ideas. SCCE has always been, admittedly, and no hiding the mission, big C, little e. We're very focused. We have an ethics track here. We have an ethics publication that Courtney manages. It's not like we're not doing anything, but we feel that the biggest weakness out there is enough people talking about ethics that we need somebody to be really strong in the compliance area. maybe it's time to go back and make the E a little bigger and start talking to people about the opposite problem. There are two possible problems and one ideal. Where the ideal is, I'm not sure. A compliance and ethics officer who thinks ethics is the solution and forget all the other risk areas. And there's a compliance officer who focuses on all the elements but doesn't work on building an ethical culture. So I agree that we need to make sure that people are doing it, but they always got to make sure we keep that balance. You look excited to be alive.
I'm always excited to be alive, right? I mean, your presence. So I want to tie what you just said in, no pun intended, about the culture part and the part we were talking about, the compliance officer being involved in the compensation of a CEO. Why not take it a step further? If you're going to involve the compliance officer or the head of compliance in the compensation committee, why not start at the ground floor and have them involved in the nomination and governance committee choosing the CEO? Because if you're looking at a culture, a corporate culture, then surely the compliance officer choosing a CEO who has an inherent good culture becoming the CEO, he's going to spread the tone from the top. So surely a compliance officer being involved in the non-gov committee, surely that's going to be a good start.
I just, first of all, I want to thank Ty because this is exactly the kind of thing that we love to talk about, is not the dang thing that's been rehashed a million times. Personally, this is the first time I recall, maybe you're just being more clear than others have and I missed it, but being a compliance officer, being involved in the selection committee, where you were first going was making me a little bit nervous. I thought maybe it was more of this, let's be in charge of the whole country, let's save the whales and be involved in all social responsibilities thing, or decide the C-suite salary. And by the way, I agree with Tom on the base, no to the base, yes to incentives, we should be involved. But as an advisor, not the decider. I have never thought about this being involved in, I'd take it further, selection of board members, selection of also maybe some bunch of C-suite folks, certainly the CEO. I'm all in.
Well, this is talking about culture. So if you want to change the culture of a company, then surely changing the culture of the C-suite executives and the board is the perfect place to start. So that's surely where the compliance officer should.
So Ty is saying, we maybe didn't pick that up on the mic, Ty is saying that, one of the many ways, and having an ethical culture is 1,000 little acts a year. It's not like doing a video with the CEO. You've got to look everywhere you can possibly ding the bad culture and 1,000 little things. And I think, I can't wait to hear Tom, being an advisor, not in charge of the company, but being an advisor in the selection committee or nomination round. I mean, I don't know how you nominate CEOs, but certainly nominate board members, I suppose. But what do you think, Tom?
So on both Ty's question and Lewis's point, what I would phrase it in the following: that compliance needs to be burned into the DNA of your company. And Roy's right; you do that through a million different little acts. Whether that be communicating culture, utilizing your HR department to communicate that message of culture every time HR has a touch point with an employee in the pre-employment screening, in the onboarding, in any annual evaluation, in any salary evaluation, in any promotion, or even a termination. Every one of those employee touch points, HR can communicate something about the values of your company. And to your point, Ty, that I would argue that that's exactly the role of compliance, and that's exactly what compliance should be doing. You should always evaluate from a cultural standpoint any CEO, senior manager, or even person you're promoting up into management. And compliance needs to be a part of that. There needs to be extensive due diligence on anyone that's brought into that level, and someone needs to, whether it be the chief compliance officer, the audit committee, or compliance committee of the board, have a very serious conversation about what the CEO sees as cultural values and how the CEO wants to implement that through his compliance function. So absolutely.
I want to share one quick story about a company I won't name, but we had their ethics officer come speak at our may have been the first one of, coincidentally, the first one of these we ever did. And she was going on and on about ethics. And somebody in the audience said, excuse me, what do you do about compliance? We leave that to the departments. About a year or two later, their CEO was fired for what was considered an ethics violation. I'm not going to name it. I wish I could because it would make the story better, but I just don't want to implicate this organization. And to your point, Ty, maybe this individual should have been involved in the selection of that CEO. But then they hired another CEO, and maybe that ethics officer or the compliance officer, as Tom's point is, an ethics officer say, well, do you believe in doing good? And the compliance officer say, let's do a background check here. You know, that was probably too big a sweeping generalization. I'd like to take that back. Push rewind.
No, you're on the record.
I'm screwed. And
You're not editing that out.
so the story goes on though. This organization has an ethics officer and really no compliance officer who poo-poos compliance, lost the CEO to an ethics violation, and then they hire a new one. And to Ty's point, maybe they should have been involved in the rehiring for sure by now. You'd think, but maybe not. Surely didn't look like it when he was soon fired for an ethics violation. And far more egregious, I would say. The first one was somewhat debatable. The second one was just stone cold black and white. You would throw anybody out for what he did. So this is a neat concept. I can't believe I've never recommended or talked about it. Thank you for bringing on something and different, like Tom and I.
Leona?
I think what I would like to see, and maybe I'm just calling out to the audience of the people who might be listening to this podcast, is more discussion on how the behaviors of a good compliance culture are also happen to be the behaviors that keep businesses afloat. Because, you know, having been in an industry that is struggling with disruption by, you know, the retail industry, by competitors, often, you know, you have companies dragging their feet because they don't want to look at problems. They don't want to be honest with themselves. I mean, sometimes those kinds of values are important also important to cultural compliance or a culture of compliance. And actually moving the culture of compliance can really change people's behavior about a lot of other things. You know, I was having a discussion with somebody today here at SCCE, and she was having trouble with the leadership and the gifts and gratuities policy. And I'm like, well, if it's that bad, you know, they're also stealing from you. I mean...
Someone from the retail industry.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you have a culture where people are allowed to feel entitled, where people are allowed to cover stuff up that they're getting, where people are taking it seriously that there's an ethical consequence, they're doing that other places too.
I would say the very basis of financial controls are segregation of duties and oversight. And that's the basis of compliance. The compliance controls are segregation of duties and appropriate oversight. That is why a company that is run better typically is more compliant, because they have financial controls that split the decision-making authority and then have oversight over people who have the ability to spend money for the corporation. So I think there's a business response to that. I think the business response is to have more robust financial controls and call them compliance controls, because they really are compliance controls. And that's how you can begin to start change that culture. Roy, we've got 1 minute left.
If we're that short, I would like to make one comment. I've been doing these with Tom, and I've never been able to do it with a crowd and say anything like this in front of folks. I assume people listen later, but is that Tom's just a blast to do this with. First of all, I think we come at it from completely different backgrounds. He has a whole lot more experience in education in certain areas than I do, and it's been fun to cover these because I think we take fundamentally different approaches, but we agree on enough that we're not always at each other's throats. And the thing that you do that is just a blast, man. You tell me I'm wrong all the time, and you don't make me feel like I'm an idiot, too. I wish more people could have these sorts of more open conversations, particularly in this day and age in this country where we seem to not be able to talk about things. First of all, you're told from the thought police, you can't talk about that, you can't think about that, that's not the answer I'm looking for, so you're politically incorrect and shut up. And I'm very concerned about where the discourse is going in this country. Not only from you not being permitted to discuss certain ideas, but also, and that will burn your house down if you disagree. So I gotta tell you, this has been an absolute blast because you don't do that stuff.
It's fun for me. So, and thank you to the audience for coming down and watching us record a podcast.
Thank you.